I'm Harriet Popham and I'm a textile designer working from home in Somerset. I studied textiles and art at Bridgewater College and was introduced to silk screen printing and freehand machine embroidery there, and I've worked with textiles ever since. I've always loved making do, and I've wanted to be an artist since I was about 4. So my course at university was surface pattern design, and it was an incredibly inspiring course. There was a huge studio where 90 students from all different disciplines within textiles were working. We had our own studio spaces, and you'd walk through and it was just covered in people's designs and samples, and you just couldn't not bounce off each other. I got really into embroidery and silk screen print there and realised that I wanted to head into the direction of interiors because I quite like the more long-lasting feel to creating interiors rather than fashion where it's a quick turnaround. But the tutors at uni were amazing and it really prepared you for life after graduating. My work incorporates animals and architecture in print and stitch. It celebrates old buildings, but it kind of softens them with organic shapes of monkeys and fish and dogs, and at the moment, circus performers, are the latest thing I'm working on. My favourite project was commissioned by Sheffield Museum. It was to design a 40 square metre vinyl for their Millennium Gallery walkway. I had no idea what they were going to ask me to do when I visited the museum, and they showed me the space and their ideas. It was a really free brief, and I just drew solidly for about 7 weeks. Painted, drew lots of things to do with the Ruskin collection that they have there. And then I pieced it all together on the computer and went up to help them install it. And I got there and they were unrolling huge panels of my design, and it was just the most exciting day probably so far of my career. So. I love working from home in Somerset. I feel that today there are so many opportunities and it's so easy to connect with people online that it's no longer essential to be in London, and for me that gives me a lot of freedom but also a lot of focus to have the space to get on with what I need to do. There have been many challenges along the way with going self-employed, and I think also after uni, when you graduate, it can be quite a hard time for artists to know what to do next. But I think it's really important to try and keep creating things, keep the momentum, commit to exhibitions and get your work out there, and also share a lot of work online so that people see it, because you never know where that might lead as well. I was incredibly inspired by an artist called Linda Florence who visited Swansea in my final year studying there. She is a sort of silk screen printed textile designer who's done wallpapers for Ted Baker, but she's also done installations at the Victoria and Albert Museum. She showed one particular project where she stenciled sugar with one of her patterns and then got ballroom dancers to go across it and track the movement, and I just loved the way that she'd use pattern in so many different ways and quite thought-provoking ways as well. I've really enjoyed doing the illustrations for these books. I was incredibly lucky to be asked to do the Great British Cake Show. That came about from putting a lot of my work online, so people had seen my illustrations and then I was approached to do that. There was an incredibly tight deadline for the first book, and it was probably one of the hardest things I've done so far. But I'm really glad I did it, and the book has now sold over 35,000 copies, and it's crazy for me to think of it in all those homes. And that led to another book, The Great British Flower Show. So that's been a whole different avenue for me that was really exciting. Coming up next, I'm exhibiting at London Design Fair at a show called Tent. So I'm working on 3 new collections to take there. there's exhibitors from all around the world, lots of different interiors companies, and I'm really excited to see what may come from that. And for the future, I just want to keep developing and building my own brand and collaborating with other artists and galleries, hopefully, museums more I would love to do, and just get a lot of the ideas I've got in my head onto fabrics and make lots of different things with those.